You're listening to ABA On Call. Hosted by myself, Rick Cabina, and Doug Kostowitz, this is your front row seat to the future of behavior analysis. Join us for fresh ideas, practical strategies, and bold conversations designed to inspire action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the season finale of ABA On Call. Wow, we made it, Doug. We made the season finale.
I just want to be clear, not series finale, season finale. We'll be back next season.
Thank you for that. We have a great fan base, and the
Mm-hmm.
fan base is loyal.
Mm-hmm.
They're very reinforcing because for some of you, we get those emails
Yeah, we do.
and they give feedback. So,
We
what
love
do
it.
you expect for a lot of behavior analysts and people in the helping profession? Good
They
people.
practice what they preach.
They do. And for this last episode of the season, we're going to tackle something that can be weighty, and that
Mm-hmm.
is discussing morality in ethics. And it doesn't take a lot to go to your social media and see somebody fired up about something. But yet, if you just casually talk about morality and ethics, not everyone understands the distinct differences between those two words and what they encompass. So, Doug, let me throw it on you. If you were going to just describe very basically what is morality, what is ethics, what would you say?
So morality seems to be norms, way of doing things held by, I think, individuals,
Yeah.
cultures,
Yep.
groups of people, however they identify.
I love it. That comes
Whereas,
right from cultural selection.
whereas ethics are more formalized. They are in a professional sense, and there is a rule governed nature to it.
I love it. So, if I were going to say what you said very shortly, morality, what people do and believe, ethics, a system to evaluate what people believe and do. And all of us, we can just talk about this to, understanding, generally speaking, uh, we all have morals. The families we work with have morals, but yet we function professionally in a system that has this body. And this body says, here's what your ethics are.
Right.
And that
I
body
mean,
is the be, yeah.
a quick example is, let's say you're working with a family and morally they provide presents to people that help. Well, ethics, you may have some ethics with the corporation or facility you work with where you're not allowed to accept gifts from the people that you work with. That is, you're bound by that rules of ethics that comes in clash with the family's moral approach. That they say, you've helped us, we want to give in kind back to you. And that is a very different thing, but it falls in this argument that we're talking about, this morality versus ethics.
Yeah. And this is a challenge. We'll talk about this later, but
Mm-hmm.
when in this segment, understanding morality, essentially as an individual who is in this culture, who's in a society, who's in the world, you can keep going out. Uh, we need to understand what's right and what's wrong. So you gave a really good example. I'm working with someone, and they say there's the famous book that was published about setting people off. If someone offers you water, you shouldn't take that water. A lot of people just really glean or grabbed onto that as an example of like, look, some people are think about that as, is it right or wrong to accept a bottle of water from a family? And some people are like, look, it's fine. And other people are like, nope, it specifically says you shouldn't accept gifts, so it's wrong. And that's what morality gets at. And this is a minor thing. We can also talk about you're working with a family and they hit their kids. Is that right or wrong? From a moral standpoint, we're not talking about the behavioral effects. We're not talking. So, again, there's a lot that a lot of people have read Sidman. A lot of people understand what punishment does. We're not talking about any of that stuff. We're just saying, is it right or wrong to hit kids?
Yep. Those
This is
and
morality.
this is and this is not an easy question currently. I mean, these are things that um, we'll talk about later. Behavior analysts need to deal with how to incorporate them. But even just in everyday world, you're dealing with conflicting morals. You're dealing with things that you see that don't mesh with your morals. There's certain things that you do that don't mesh with morals within different settings. So you're constantly trying to decide, how do I behave under a variety of conditions that do or do not agree with or meet with reinforcement in certain communities, or meet with punishment in certain communities. So you've got this very wavy line as you're looking at morality, because like you said, it could come from religions, it can come from cultures, it can come from groups, it can come from families, it can come from a variety of things, and nobody says that they all line up.
Ain't that the truth? And then I mean, you could go on living your life as a moral person.
Mhm.
Us and many in our audience have this body that's governing how, and they're judging us. And there are consequences to, you might be working with the family, and that family might be doing one thing, but if you started participating with the morals of that family, but yet, this body says, oh, no, 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 you could lose your standing. There could be all sorts of sanctions. So the ethics are somebody that are evaluating you. This isn't, we're behavior analysts, but this goes all the way up in all levels of society, like the government right now. It used to be that there's these ethics panels, and there are ethics where if you're a government official, you can't do insider trading. But yet you see again and again politicians on both sides of the aisle who are enriching themselves because they're breaking this ethical code. So they are and nobody is saying anything about it. So the ethics, there is this body that if you pull back, if you went back in time, people were losing their seats in either Congress or in the Senate if they were to do this because they were governed by this body, and that has changed. And it's really important to understand that ethics is somebody saying, we're going to evaluate you, we're going to improve upon this, what we believe in, and there can be sanctions. Again, that gets start getting into what are the rules and the outcomes. But for now, understanding ethics and how that's different, how ethics plays a different role than just having morals.
Yep. And I think that is the key right there. Morals and ethics are not an interchangeable term. They can be in agreement, but they can be, as you've said, in direct misalignment. So yeah, it's not the same thing. And I think if I was to say this, I think morality is a larger term than ethics. Morality covers more things than ethics, because ethics may be more tied to the professional behavior of individuals, but still, you cannot equate those.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's well said. Ethics or morality can be considered local, whereas ethics could be more, I don't want to say global, but
it may be. It may be. It depends on what your global representation is.
yeah.
It may be that your global is your community. It may be your global. You may not go past that. I know that we're used to thinking now because of the internet and the expansion, like global is literally global at this point. But
Yeah.
when you are looking at our morals, your global may be much smaller than the actual globe.
Yeah. Whoever that body is, they're going to come up with some kind of generalizable principles because your morals could be inconsistent. Your morals could be based on whatever your selection history is, whereas this ethical body is going to make you say, no, this is how you're going to operate. I long ago was in the Boy Scouts, and all of these organizations have these ethical codes. And if you wanted to remain a Boy Scout, then there were certain ethics that you had to obtain and stick to, or there could be some kind of sanction. So that's the big difference between ethics and morals.
All right, and that
And
brings us to our first. Were you going to tell? No, you tell us.
no, you go.
The first secret word is video.
Beautiful. Okay, let's talk about our second section and getting at moral truths as facts about well-being.
Mm.
And this area is something that you and I have, we've read books, we've talked about this,
Yeah.
we've individually at our respective universities have held seminars, and we've talked about this because understanding, well, what do we mean by a moral truth, and how can we have a scientific view that can inform morality? That's a huge boon
Yep.
for humanity if we could come out with that. Because you referenced this earlier, and you said, where do morals come from? You could be part of a religious community, and whatever your religious community is, they could say, well, go back to whatever time, and we had a book, or there was a prophet, or whatever the circumstances are in that community, there were morals that came out, and then you would say, based on this religious tradition, this is how we view what is right or wrong. And you could also be in a community that does the same thing,
Mhm.
and there's all these different ways of doing it, but what is the best way of doing it?
Yeah. I think this is where we're going to really show the difference. Whereas ethics have people that are making decisions about these rules and norms on how you handle, morality does not abide by those.
Yep.
Morality may be built from tradition. Morality may be built by convenience. Morality may be built by so many different factors that it doesn't come under the same control as those ethical professional guidelines. So when you say, how can science come into play? There's people that suggest a way to put morality through a lens, and science is a lens that perhaps to this point is the best way of knowing things. Um, that people may argue with that, but arguably it's the best way of trying to make sense of the world. And if you're going to take science and put it through that moral lens, it's been proposed that morality may be linked to the well-being of individuals, promoting well-being, minimizing suffering, whether that's individual or group suffering. So we don't, thinking about that morality lens, what can science bring in? And as we talk about it, it might be that looking at the well-being of individuals, looking at the well-being of groups, minimizing suffering.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yeah.
that's a go ahead.
Science doesn't say that.
No,
People say, if we're going to use science,
right. If we use it.
if we use science, what would we pick to understand a moral truth? And There is a book that's out there that suggests this, and the book says it's all about a moral truth should be what increases or decreases the well-being of a conscious creature. And that's the proposition. And we have science, we can have these, again, we said we're going to talk about moral facts. So this is where science weighs in. And the question is, if we're going to understand morality and what's right or wrong, I thought about this a lot, Doug. This is beautiful in its simplicity. It's really hard to argue against what's the counter argument of, well, I don't like the proposition of we should be understanding morality as to what increases or decreases the well-being of a conscious organism. Like, what's the counter to that?
Uh,
Nope,
it, it,
that's
it's
not good. We shouldn't be understanding what makes people feel better or what makes people feel worse.
right. It's hard to argue of minimizing suffering, increasing well-being of individuals as a litmus test for is this moral or not,
Yeah,
or what. And again, it's not a black or white issue. It's usually a gray area between the two, of a continuum of less moral or more moral, I think, is a safer statement to say.
yeah. If well-being matters, then these moral questions graduate to empirical questions.
Right.
We can say, let's say punishment. Is punishment moral? Well, in a specific case, we can say, is it good or bad? If we understand, does punishment increase or decrease the well-being of a conscious creature? We're the humans, and we're going to apply punishment. Or, the same thing with your dog. Your dog, if you wanted to argue your dog was a conscious creature, should you is this going to increase or decrease their well-being? Like anyone, all of a sudden, when you have this shift in this viewpoint, you can apply this and then you can come up with an answer that can affect the morality.
And what you end up with are data based questions to
Yes.
evaluate the proposition. What is taken out of the situation are non database questions, or uh, arguments that are made a priori, right? Oh, well, it's just good for you, so do it. Well, that's not based on the outcome of the situation. That's not based on the outcome 2 days later. That's not taking into account the effect of whatever. That's done just because. And that may or may not produce the same moral well-being outcome for that individual.
Yeah. There are a lot of things in the world that people will struggle with understanding, is this right or wrong? But looking at it and saying, well, is this increasing or decreasing the well-being of this particular person, completely changes the game. And some things, if what you're doing is creating abuse, or there's neglect, or there's coercion, that thing that you're doing, for example, let's talk about child rearing. There was this book that was written in the 90s. It was called To Raise a Child, and it was based on biblical interpretation of child rearing. And this book was saying that if the Bible says this interpretation, if your child's not listening, you need to strike them with a rod. And the authors said, if your child doesn't listen, find a switch. And they talked about what that switch would look like and smack your kid. And okay, is that right or wrong? What is that doing to the relationship of that child? What is that doing to that child in the moment? What is it like? There's all of these different ways that we could come in and say, you know what, morally, that's wrong, even though they're because this is what science is saying. Science is saying if you punish people in this manner, this bad thing's going to happen, this bad thing's going to happen, this bad thing's going to happen, versus uh, the book authors who are saying, well, we have this morality that says this is okay, and therefore it's right. So science or this other group of people that's the choice that people have.
Yeah. And you get into these and the argument can be, well, of course they listen in the moment, but what we know that there are a variety of ways to measure outcomes. And we don't look necessarily at a singular outcome when we're working with individuals or whoever as to the effects of the situation. So there may be some amazing outcome for you, but you may be decreasing the well-being of others. Well, then that can be measured, that can be evaluated. You can have some immediate good outcome with a delayed problem. Well, that is decreasing the well-being for that individual or you versus some negative outcome quickly that could be some good outcome down the line. So it's not a clear cut thing, but it poses such a different analysis that for these moral questions, it poses an analysis based in the outcomes, based in the effects. And too much of morality is viewed from the lens of because. Do this because I said so. Do this because this said so.
Yeah.
We don't ever question it. Once it's put there, we don't question it. Unlike, and I'll bring this back in very quick, unlike ethics, which are then examined and through groups of people, they try to make decisions. Again, it's not one or the other. It's usually a range between, um, but they're responding to what are these potential biases and outcomes if you don't follow this. So ethics almost is taking some of those questions and trying that. Whereas oftentimes when we view morality without this scientific lens, we don't. We just take it as, oh, you're this, so you don't have morals. Oh, you're this, so you're following that. You're being moral by doing this. No, I don't think that that's as effective as if we were looking at this as an outcome.
What I love about this proposition is that this elevates our field, behavior science, as a branch of morality. And we don't need to look at metaphysics. We can look at all of this information that we have discovered on many different things, and we can say this is what the evidence is. It becomes an empirical question, and that helps people with their morality. Okay, that brings us to the next secret word, which is well-being.
Okay, so our third section. Now, we've talked about ethics and morality. We've now looked at morality through a little bit different lens if we want to take a scientific approach. So now you started on it. Behavior analysis, behavior analytic practitioners, the science of behavior analysis, applied behavior analysis, and morality. What how are we dealing with this? And this is not just looking at ethics, right? Obviously we have an ethical foundation. Within our science and practitioners, we have ethics that we have to abide by, but you're going to encounter as a behavior analyst the moralities of families, the moralities of groups, the moralities of other disciplines,
Mhm.
your own moralities. So what where does behavior analysis have a little bit of a leg up on this?
Yeah. Wow, that's such a good question. So much of what we do as behavior analysts, we talk a lot about social validity. And someone wrote a paper. I was just listening to, I can't remember who wrote this paper, but they did an analysis of how many people reporting on social validity, and the number was like 24%. It's like, wow, I was shocked by that because I'm going to have to figure out where that paper was, but in the review. But the fact that social validity, if we talk about social validity as being a moral act, then we're looking at things that we're doing to improve people's lives. If we talk about communication, for example, this is a way to help improve lives. I remember when I was a grad student, I did this reading seminar with the one professor, and we read this book called When Slow is Fast Enough. And this professor was saying, you know what? If there are kids and they want to sit in STEM all day and be by themselves, who are we to intervene? Who are we to go in there and say anything? And again, the title, was all about suggesting that why are we doing these things? And if someone is operating very slowly, then that's fine for them. And we shouldn't. But morally speaking, if we just leave people and we don't intervene at all, what kind of life are they going to have? What's the well being of that person? And this is a moral issue if we look at it that way. And that book that I read is absolutely wrong on the morality because you're not going to be increasing the well-being of someone. You're reducing their life choices. They can't be independent. They can't enjoy, however you define the good life. Whatever that good life is, this person you're saying, you know what? I'm not going to help them. Whatever the issues are presenting, I'm just going to let them be on their own and let them develop as they see fit.
So you are putting that lens back on outcomes. So obviously, it may be argued that, oh, letting them stem, letting them remain at whatever is a certain outcome. What are the other potential outcomes available to individuals in our society? What is considered a outcome that promotes well-being? All of those, regardless of, because there are people that would say to this day that we should not intervene if somebody wants to do something to that effect, right? They may not have ever interacted with a variety of contingencies that would have promoted anything else. But you coming back to the lens of what are we doing to promote their well-being, to decrease suffering, increase flourishing, that can help guide our interventions. You're right. Social validity, we take that into account. We look at what's built into applied behavior analysis. It's got to be effective. Just changing a behavior to do it one more time may or may not be effective. If I can read one more word a day, that's a problem, right? We wouldn't
Yeah.
want that. They're still not promoting the individual's well-being. Again, it's not a yes or no proposition. It's that range between. There's that continuum of well-being and uh, flourishing, I guess, would be the opposite of suffering if you wanted to take that route. So you can it allows us to evaluate the interventions. It allows us to have these discussions with individuals and families who want to maybe lean towards these not so flourishing situations. No, maybe it may not be suffering in the sense that there's pain involved, but you're definitely not promoting the well-being of that individual. And that it should be and is a guiding principle of applied behavior analysis. So you look at it from a behavior analyst perspective, we do a lot of these things and we're guided by ethics, right? One of those ethical questions is, should we be using punishment? And in some situations, it may be ethically or
Yes.
decreasing suffering to do that to prevent even worse suffering. So
Yes.
you're moving. So you've got this. You said it earlier. We do a really good job as a science. We're very much driven by these ethics, which give us a leg up on these more global moral questions.
Yeah. I'm going to jump on what you just said about punishment. When is punishment acceptable? I recently engaged in a conversation and looked at when a teacher corrects someone, is that punishment? Yes, it is.
Mhm.
Again, when we talk about punishment, even in our own group of people, we have to understand punishment. This deals with the outcomes. Is it reducing the behavior?
Right.
Right. We're not talking about the punishment that, again, whenever, even in our field, we have to just constantly remind ourselves. So, in this instance, are you going to say not to correct kids? There are people out there, Doug, you know this, that
I
we
know
talk
it.
about don't break out the red pen because that's going to ruin the kid. So, there's all these people that say you should never give any kind of feedback. And of course, we've seen how that plays out. You have legions of kids that don't learn to read, they don't learn to write, they don't learn to spell. And where's their positive outcomes? Where's their well-being when they have all these problems getting through life because of that? So, a really important point you made, and same thing too with you have a kid, you have a child that's going to run out in the street, and you yank that kid back before they run out. Is someone going to argue about that? Again, morally, that's the right judgment. You may have done something that was punishing to that child, but for their well-being in that instance, in that specific instance, you very well saved their lives.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, coming back to behavior analysis, we deal with a variety of questions. You work with families. You work within a variety of cultural groups that promote different morals. And I feel like we're built as a science to lean towards that well-being of the individual, promoting it with data-based decision making. We're looking at including everybody in the individual's outcome. If they can't be a advocate for themselves, then we're looking at caregivers, teachers, we're talking to them. And so we need to, of course, abide by the ethics of a situation, but also continue to look at that morality from the that database decision making and try to argue from that. We've spent, and I know you've done this, we've spent a lot of times arguing for the validity of an outcome with a teacher, with other people because of the data that's being produced, right? Well, we're
Yep,
like, oh, you got to continue doing this because well, I don't like it. Sorry, you don't like it. It's producing mega outcomes for this kid.
that's right.
And then, so you have to now, that's a whole different argument. If somebody doesn't interpret data or doesn't want to talk to data, but that's neither here nor there. We're talking now about guiding us as practitioners, us as behavior analysts. We will encounter these moral things and trying to use the same argument that we do for interventions. Why are you going to use intervention A over intervention B? Look at the history of it. It produces mega gains for these kids just like yours. Let's try this based on everything we know about them. That's why we do it. You can use that from a moral perspective as well.
Yeah. This conversation that we have, it's not easy. There's
Mm-mm.
a lot to it. As you were talking, I was started thinking, I wonder how the BACB would influence if this was their compass. If they looked at morality through the lens of what increases or decreases the well-being of conscious creatures. How would it change anything in our practice? Maybe we ought to write a book, Doug.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's hard because you're taking on something very different than you do with ethics. I feel like there is, it's almost, you have to follow your ethics, but sometimes it's, well, you can't question someone's morals. Wait a minute. Why do we have ethics that are guiding our practices, but someone who's promoting morals that are not producing well-being for individuals, why must we adhere to something that is producing more suffering or does not produce it? So that I just feel like that's a more difficult conversation, as you said, to have. And it's not shared the same way. It's not shared as an outcome.
Yeah. Well, right on, man. That brings us to our last secret word, which is dignity. Doug, this is a great conversation. I have enjoyed talking with you this entire season.
Mhm.
It's been great. And I look forward to talking with you in another season, which is coming up. And to our listeners, we said this at the beginning, and it never hurts to just keep repeating this. Thank you for joining us. We do get your feedback every week. I know a lot of you don't give us feedback online, but we've met some of you at conferences, and we really appreciate when you come up to us and tell us that there's a particular episode you like. That's very meaningful for us. This particular podcast is something that Doug and I spend a lot of time coming up with topical seminar segments, and these are things that we're going to continue doing. And we thank all of you for joining us each episode. With that, thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to talking with you again in our next season. Thank you for being part of ABA On Call. Want to grab your CEU? Just click the link in the instructions, complete the quiz, enter the secret words, and pay the fee to download your certificate. You've done the work, claim the credit. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you in the next episode.